Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
I'm Ian.
Today we're talking about great vinyl albums. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that we put together, and the Patreon page. So make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoy the episode, make sure you give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. I will say, when I start putting the albums together that I was going to talk about today, I had to narrow my list down. There's I think I had 8 or 10 of them all together, so I know it's a bunch of them. So make sure you drop us a comment down below. Let us know what some of your favorite final albums of all time were. The first one that kind of came to my mind when I started thinking about this, it's a great album. Of course, I love this band. They're not one of my favorite bands, but they were definitely like the first grunge band that I started listening to. Is probably, if you start thinking about this topic, it's probably one that a lot of people will think of. But the album is In Utero by Nirvana. It's just a great album, and it's like I think the fitting end to grunge. It was basically after Kurt Cobain's death, grunge music really changed, and it really didn't exist anymore. It kind of morphed into just kind of like regular alternative rock. But I think this was the album that it was the end of all of it. At least that's kind of the way I look at it.
It was the end of a lot of things, really. I mean, at that point, it was big. It was, it was as big for us at our age as Lennon getting shot in 1980. And Hendrix dying and all that stuff. It was that version for us.
It would have been interesting to see what Nirvana would have done moving forward, especially Kurt Cobain musically moving forward. But it's a great end, I think, to their career.
My first one, and I apologize, I don't have albums to show you.
Ian doesn't have props, so I'll put a picture up right about here.
My first one is Brainwashed by George Harrison. It was released shortly after he died, so I'm not sure. I mean, because there's artists that have albums that were released after they died, but this was very quickly after I think this is like a month after he died, or maybe it came out right before he died. I don't remember, but
it was right around the time he died.
It was very close, but I love the album, and George has always been my favorite Beatle. His solo work, some of it's hit or miss, but overall I tend to like his solo stuff better than the other Beatles for the most part. And Brainwash was a great album, and it was just sad because it was a good album that he didn't get to appreciate the release of.
Yeah. Well, I guess sticking with the theme of that album, my next pick is Let It Be by the Beatles. It was the Beatles' last album, even though I know the Beatles did not record this last. They actually recorded Abbey Road, was the last album that they recorded, but Let It Be was the last album that they released. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the way I look at it. But and I will say that those last 2 albums, Abbey Road and Let It Be, are probably my top 2 favorite Beatles albums. I kind of go back and forth. But Let It Be has a couple of my favorite Beatles tracks on there, so that's why I lean toward.
My favorite Beatles track is on this album. It's a George track too.
Yeah.
It's I Me Mine. I love that song. It's so bluesy and soulful.
Yeah, but I think same thing with In Utero. I think Let It Be was a great album to kind of wrap up the Beatles' career.
So my next one, obviously the main force of this group went on and beyond, but Icky Thump by the White Stripes. It was the last White Stripes album.
Which I'm surprised I actually don't have a copy of.
I do have a copy. I just didn't think to bring it.
I got to get a copy of it.
But it's my favorite White Stripes album by far, and it's also their last album, the last album that they made. I think it really kind of defines what Jack White was starting to do on his own too. Yeah. But it was really a good culmination of a band's progression, especially a 2-piece band, being able to create the type of music that was infinitely more complicated or complex compared to their first album.
Yeah. And
it's my favorite of the White Stripes albums.
So next album is one that actually took me a little while to get into. Probably I'd say within the last maybe 5 to 7 years, it's become probably my favorite or maybe second favorite album from this band. The album is L.A. Woman by the Doors. It was the last album released during Jim Morrison's life. They released a couple of albums after that. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they use unused lyrics from Jim Morrison or if it was just music. I never listened to them. This was, in my opinion, this is it. This was the end of the band. LA Woman was it for the band, and it's kind of the same way with all the other albums. It's a great kind of way to package up their career. The Doors did so many great albums over such a short period of time.
Yeah.
It was, what, 4 years, 5 years?
Yeah.
67 to 71.
Yeah.
So,
very quick.
great music they packed in such a short period of time. I guess they always say, the brightest or the hottest flame burns quickest, isn't that what they always
Something
say?
to that
Something
effect,
along
yeah.
those lines. I don't know. I'm terrible when it comes to stuff like that, but whatever. But great album. I will say that I need a better copy of this. I just realized this is I think it's an original pressing. This thing is really beat to death, so I need to pick up a new copy of it. But I just love this album.
So my last one, again, I don't have a prop for this, is Clockwork Angels by Rush. It was their last album. I believe it was 2012 it came out. Whether or not it would have been their last album if Neil Peart hadn't gotten sick and died, who's to say? But I think he was kind of at the end of what he was kind of ready to retire anyway before getting sick. So it was probably going to be their last album regardless. But it's a very unique album. Neil Peart's always been the primary lyricist for the band. And he created a concept album and then went ahead and got a co-writer to put together a book that complemented the concept that was in the album. I haven't read the book yet. I'm having a hard time finding a copy of it. But it's a very... Musically, it's very in tune with what the stuff they were doing before that. It wasn't anything mind-blowing, but the concept was very unique.
Yeah.
And Neil Peart's lyrics are very thought-provoking. They
I
always have been.
don't think I've ever listened to the entire album.
Yeah, I like the album. I don't know how well it sold. I don't really remember. I know there was a little bit of buzz about it, but it died off very fast.
Yeah.
But as a rule, I don't listen to buzz or anything like that. And I've always been a Rush fan to some degree. I'm more so now than I ever was when I was little. But
Yeah.
when Clockwork Angels came out and I bought it, I was like, oh great, another good Rush release. Because when bands get older, their music can
They lose something.
I mean things start to ebb and flow a little bit more. It was a very strong release by a band that had had multiple strong releases for decades.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good album for them to go out on if they had to go out. I wish they hadn't, but if they had to go out on an album, Clockwork Angels is a good album to go out on.
Well, then the last one I got on the list is one that I guess might get some pushback from people because I guess there were a couple of albums that came out after this one. But this was the last album that he recorded. This was the last album that was meant to be a full studio album, full studio release. And that album is American 4 by Johnny Cash. Of course, there was 2 more American albums that came out after this. But that was all stuff that he had, covers and things like that they had recorded during the American sessions for, I forgot, it was like 10 years that they were releasing, or almost 10 years that they've been working on them. But, you could hear in his voice a dying man on this album. And you could tell that it was all coming to an end. And I think that that pain and everything that kind of happened in his life really came through in the way he performed on this album. And it's what makes this album, in my opinion, the greatest album that Johnny Cash ever released. And it just happened to be the last one.
I totally agree with everything you said about, this being his last. It's in his voice. You can hear that. Like he almost knew it was his last. And I wonder if we would think as highly of it as we do if it wasn't his last, if he had maybe gone on to do a couple more. Maybe the 6th one he did work on would have been the best. But all the things, those factors combined is really what makes this album great, on top of the fantastic performances and songs on it, because it's almost painful to listen to. And I think that bleeds through almost intentionally. It's meant to be painful to listen to, I think, to a degree. So, I mean, that's why I totally agree with you on that.
Well, that's all we got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. Let us know what some of your favorite final albums are. Like I said, I had like 8 to 10 on my list. Those were just a couple of the ones I decided to go with. Let us know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. And that's all we got. Until next time,
Talk to y'all later.
keep on spinning. Peace.